I guess you could call it our summer of freedom, the year that we both turned 18. Straight out of high school, we hitchhiked all over. Man, we were something to see. That was the summer you dated my cousin, till they took us away in the fall. Now I surely wish you were standing here with me when I touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. God help us all. Touch your name on the wall. Every time that I come here, I wear my fatigues to honor the men that I knew. I touch the name of each man from my outfit and say them out loud as I do. Now some people say they all died for nothing, but I don't completely agree. 'Cause this brother here, he didn't die for no country. He died for me. Touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. God help us all. Touch your name on the wall. This here is a memorial for the 65 guys from Jersey City who got killed in Vietnam. You can see we put it up in 2001. What happened was that, for years there was never any kind of memorial for the people from Jersey City who died. This building back here is called the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Community Center, but that was put up back in the late 80s, but they never put a sign out in front. They had a little plaque inside, so no one knew what it was. So back in 1997, we began an effort to begin. The first thing we did was get this building rededicated and get signage put up about it, just so people knew what it was. And then over a period of time, we decided to build this memorial, and we raised the funds from the community through sale of T-shirts and collections and things like that. We held a softball marathon out here one time, a 24-hour softball marathon, and that's how the funds were raised for this. And then we designed it through our committee. We sort of designed it so it looks like the Vietnam Wall. It uses the same typeface. It's the same type of stone. And our purpose was so these people wouldn't be forgotten. And so that's why that motto's on there, because, this was put up in 2001 and the Vietnam War ended in 1975, so it was like 25 years that people were just sort of forgotten. And after we put this memorial up, we had put on here in memory of those who lost their lives in the war and also those who died from war-related causes after they returned home, because a lot of soldiers came back and they were suffering from things like Agent Orange, which was a chemical defoliant they used over there, and it contains dioxin, so a lot of people got cancer and died from that. In fact, people in Vietnam are still suffering from that, and a lot of veterans are too, but in Vietnam there's never been anything done to assist those people. And other people died from suicides. People come back and they can't really deal with some of the issues and they kill themselves, and a number of reasons people died. Some people, they come back and they really can't get back into what they used to be, and they end up drinking themselves to death or something like that. So we had put on the bottom and those others who died from war-related causes. And after we put this up, some people asked us, well, what about individually remembering some of the people that we lost like that? So the following year we started the Hidden Casualties Project, which is a way to individually remember people who came back and died from various reasons. And that's what some of these stones are. And each year when people get into, obviously people, we don't have records of people like that, so it's when families come to us. Like just the other day, someone came to me with another application. We have a little application. You got to show that you were in Vietnam, that you lived in Jersey City, and you got to make a representation how your death was caused by war-related causes. And then each year we put down these little bricks just to remember them so they're not forgotten. Like one of the guys here, Clarence Fitch, he was a friend of mine, a black Marine veteran who came back from the war, and he was addicted to drugs, and eventually he stopped doing drugs, but he contracted the HIV virus and eventually died in 1990 from AIDS,
A friend of yours from Jersey City or from Vietnam?
From Jersey City. I actually met him working out in the post office on a picket line during a strike. And we started talking on the picket line, and I found out he was a veteran, and I recruited him to the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and he played an active role in working against the war and working for, change in policy. Like he traveled to Nicaragua during the 80s as part of a delegation we sent down there because we were not too thrilled with what the government was doing in Central America in those days. And he worked on a number of other things. There's a movie out about him, a documentary called Another Brother that is shown on Channel 13 several times. And it's a pretty powerful thing, just telling sort of his experience as the experience of a lot of black veterans, African American veterans. But there's a number of these guys here. This guy Dennis Graham right there. He was suffering from post-traumatic stress, and he was going to the East Orange VA, and there was this doctor out there who was using he was doing experiments on GIs or veterans, giving them medications to try and figure out, sort of like these psychotic medications. And he fell over dead right at the doctor's office in the VA from a massive heart attack caused by the medicine. That Dennis Graham. I used to work with him too. I could go through a few of these people. I know a number of them. This guy Charlie Camilleri, he died in his early 30s from cancer caused by Agent Orange. Joe Basin, this guy here, he was given these medications from the VA. See, in the VA, a lot of times, if you're suffering from what they call war trauma or post-traumatic stress, today they use medications as a way of dealing with things a lot more than trying to figure it out and help people heal. And sometimes people get them medications and they're not too good at maintaining them. And they found him like 2 weeks after he died in his apartment, So that's what this is. But the idea of this memorial was sort of to remember the cost of the war for this community, So that's what it is. But we hold a ceremony here every Memorial Day, and we usually get 300-400 people. We fill this whole area up. And it's not like a pro-war or an anti-war thing. It's like a remembrance thing, to remember the cost. It's like after all the slogans are said and all the flags are taken down and all that, people still go home and they lost their son. And nowadays they're losing their daughters too, So you have a responsibility to remember the cost, and that's really what this is. As you can see on our symbol, we have the map of Vietnam and a rifle in the ground symbolizing a dead soldier and the helmet on top, and you can see it says JCNJ here. You can also see we got a little peace sign there, And that was decided by the whole committee that we felt that was appropriate because we didn't want a war, we wanted peace, So that's it. I'll tell you some interesting stories. I wasn't from Jersey City originally. I'm originally from Buffalo. I moved here in 1972, So I've been here for 33 years, but I didn't know any of these people. I knew some of them guys, but none of these because I didn't grow up here. Right. But it turns out, in doing the research for this stone, it turns out that this guy here, Robert Morgan, was in my company in Vietnam.
Really?
I was in the 4th Battalion, 9th Infantry Manchus Delta Company, and he was killed on the day I was wounded the first time. And it was a battle on August 30th, 1967 called the Horseshoe, where we got ambushed by the Saigon River, and they had us in a crossfire. They killed, a lot of people got killed, and wounded, and I actually took a round in my upper back that caused my lung to collapse, and I was reported dead. But I didn't know him, but he was in my company, which means he died no further than the road away from me, because we were in that area. And I thought that was some kind of sign that. I mean, it's strange, you know what I mean? It's like I don't like to put no religious meaning to it, but it's beyond our normal what you'd expect.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this is I brought this to show you. Like you might be interested in this. This is a picture of what I was when I first went to Vietnam.
When was this?
In 1967.
And when did you come out?
Well, I got medevaced out right at the beginning of 1968. See, before we go on a combat operation, we used to take what we call a cherry picture, and that's before your first operation. That was in early August '67 at Cu Chi in Vietnam, and I was in Vietnam from August '67 to January '68. You were supposed to do a 12-month tour of duty, but I was wounded 3 times in the time I was in Vietnam, and the 3rd wound I received was a bullet through my right knee, and if your wound took longer to heal than the rest of the time you had, they'd send you back. So I went to Japan and then back to the States. So I only lasted about 6 months in country, but I was wounded 3 times, so if I would have been there a year, I would have been perforated. So
You look no older than me in that picture.
I was 20 right there. I was 20 years old.
My age.
Like we used to say, young, dumb, and full of cum.
You look like not too far from a lot of the guys we have serving currently.
Well, it's, you know, there's an old men who go now. Actually, nowadays they are sending old men, but as a general rule, there's a song by Phil Oakes that says it's always the old who lead us to the war, and it's always the young to fall. You know. You know, the last battle I was in was on December 20th, 1967, and we were at a little ville right on the Cambodian border called Bo Tuc. And about 2 in the morning, we started getting mortared, and the mortar rounds started coming in, and all of a sudden we started hearing people yelling in Vietnamese about maybe 50 meters in front of us, and they started attacking us with human wave attack, man. It's like, did you see the movie Platoon at the end where it was like that, man? It was, I swear to God, it was just like that. It was crazy like that. And these guys come charging. These are North Vietnamese. These weren't even Viet Cong. These are North Vietnamese regulars, and they come charging in on us, and they overran the position next to ours, and I was in a foxhole with 2 black guys, a guy named Jameson and Walker. And we used to have nicknames for him, so we called Jameson Nasty Fats because he was a little chubby. And Walker, we called Walker Thump because he shot an M79 grenade launcher, and the sound it made was a thump, you know? And they overran the next position, and all of a sudden, this is 2 in the morning, we see this guy coming down toward us, and we couldn't tell when it was one of our guys or one of them. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up behind the hole and stuck his rifle in the hole. It was the front sight of an AK-47 I saw. And I had my rifle sticking up at the opening. And he pulled his trigger and I pulled my trigger. It was like a barrel-to-barrel thing. You know, like I saw the muzzle flash of an AK and pulled my trigger, and I blacked out because he hit me right through the knee and shattered my knee, you know. But luckily for me, I pulled my trigger and put 3 rounds up his chest. But I didn't even know that. I came to a few minutes later and my weapon was jammed, and these guys were putting out fire, and one guy pulled me out of the hole and threw me on his back, and we retreated to another position. And I had to lay in this foxhole eating Darvons all night because my knee was shattered, you know, and the fighting was going on all over us. They overran the artillery. They set the artillery rounds on fire. It was just blowing up. It was like, that was the only night in Vietnam I thought I was dead for sure, you know. But after the fighting ended in the morning, they put me on a stretcher to medevac me out, and they carried me over to this guy who had shot me, and he was sitting up against this tree stump, sitting up, 3 bullet holes up his chest, his AK across his lap, dead. And the sergeant says, yeah, here's the gook you killed. You did a good job. This is your confirmed kill. You killed this gook. Because they used to have a big thing around individual confirmed kills, you know. And I seen this guy, and he was about my age, you know. And, you know, I started thinking, how come he's dead and I'm alive? You know, it was just pure luck. It had nothing to do with who's got a better cause. It had to do with whose barrel was aimed at a vital part of your body. And I started thinking, I wonder if he's got a girlfriend and how his mother's going to find out and all that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was doing was refusing to surrender his humanity.
Thank you. That's a really deep step right for that. Really nice. I sent it to my daughter.
So we're not going to only walk into New Orleans, we're going to dance into New Orleans. Second line.
Right on.
Y'all ready? Y'all ready?
Yeah.
Can I get a witness?
Yeah.
All right. Like Ann said, we are in one of the most contaminated zones in this region, but I think it's important for us to recognize. Could you do that again, please? All right, did I get your attention now? You know, when the United States military goes into a country, they don't declare just war on the people, they also declare war on the land. And what we have here is another example of war on the land by failing to clean up the mess. Now in Vietnam, the United States government used chemical defoliants called Agent Orange, Agent Blue, Agent Purple, Agent White, but they were all based on dioxin, which is one of the most hazardous carcinogens known to humanity. That chemicals poisoned the land and caused many soldiers and Vietnamese people to die from cancers or to have birth defected children or long-term problems for the rest of their life. As veterans, when we came back from the Vietnam War, the United States government tried to deny that there was any problems caused by these chemical defoliants, these dioxin weapons, these chemical weapons. But the reality is that people began getting sick and veterans began to organize because we knew that there was something wrong. And it took a long struggle. We filed a lawsuit against the chemical companies, we demonstrated, we held, we did various activities. They eventually told us there's no proof that Agent Orange will cause these health problems, so until you come up with scientific proof, we're not going to listen to you. So we went out and got scientists to do studies on the issue. Because you know what they were doing was they're saying the victim has to prove they're victimized, which is the way this government is going to treat the young men coming back and women coming back from Iraq as well. And it took us until 1991 for Congress to finally pass the Agent Orange bill that recognized some conditions as service-connected for purposes of medical treatment and compensation. At this point, there's 11 conditions that they recognize, and 2 for children of veterans. 3 for children of veterans, and many conditions have been denied. So this fight continues for the veterans of Agent Orange, the Agent Orange victims. But one thing that's never been addressed is the people in Vietnam who are still suffering from those problems. Not only the soldiers who were from North Vietnam or the Viet Cong, but also the soldiers who were in the ARVNs, who were our supposed allies during the war, and large numbers of civilians in the areas that were defoliated. So we have started a campaign called the Vietnam Agent Orange Relief and Responsibility Campaign to support the Vietnamese who have formed an association and just recently filed a lawsuit against the chemical companies who made these defoliants. The end of this month, there will be an international conference in Vietnam of Agent Orange victims. There are going to be a large number of people from the Vietnam Association of the Victims of Agent Orange, as well as people from Australia, Korea, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States. We have organized a delegation that's going from the United States to this conference. It's made up of 4 veterans who are Agent Orange victims themselves. And if the United States government ever gives me a passport, I'm going to be going leading that delegation. That'll be 1 week from today, actually. So I think it's important to talk about this stuff because the struggle for test, treat, and compensate the victims of Agent Orange is a continuing issue, and the use of chemical weapons and the poisoning of American soldiers and the people and land of other countries is a continuing issue. We're going to hear about depleted uranium. There's even more. And I think that we are dealing with probably one of the most hypocritical governments in a long time when they accuse Saddam Hussein of having weapons of mass destruction, when our government, our country has continually used chemical warfare and depleted uranium against people in other lands. You know something? That's like the sinner calling the saint the sinner. So let me just say in conclusion, the struggle for the justice for the victims of Agent Orange is not over. In fact, it's just begun because we've only dealt with one half of the coin until the Vietnamese get some kind of justice as well. And if you want more information about that, please come and see me and I'll tell you about our campaign. Thank you.
Right here.
That box up there is the Tyvek.
Yeah.
I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm going to lead to Paris. When I get through walking you through, when I get back to New Orleans. Right there.
Oh, no.
1, 3, 2, 3, 2.
I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm going to lead to Paris. When I get through walking you through, when I get back to New Orleans. You used to be my honey. Now you spend all my money.
Levees, not bombs. 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 All right. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Troops are on the ground after Katrina hit, providing relief to the people of this area. And I think it's worth briefly, even though my voice is almost gone, I think it's worth briefly telling the story of how that happened. Because we hold an annual convention of our organization every year. And last August we held it in Dallas, Texas. And when we held it, we invited Gold Star mom Cindy Sheehan, whose son was killed in Iraq, to come and speak. And when she came to Texas, she said, if I'm going to be in Texas and Bush is on vacation down in Crawford, I'm going to go down there and camp out to try and meet with him. So we took Cindy down in the White Rose bus, which is part of this march also, and sat down in a ditch, and that became the Camp Casey movement, which rocked America. Now, we did something, but you know, what it came down to today is the day that 3 years ago George Bush began the invasion of Iraq. On this very day, 3 years ago, a war that didn't have to happen
and is illegal under international law, was launched by our government against another nation. So when we started talking about, well, how are we going to take that opportunity, that occasion to again raise our voices to demand that the troops be brought home and the people of America be taken care of, we talked about the idea, why don't we do something like the old Selma to Montgomery March, but this time go from Mobile to New Orleans to talk about how the money you spend abroad should be spent here. If you can build a military base in the middle of a desert to wage war in 6 months, don't tell me you can't rebuild a city with over 500,000 people in it in 6 months. But here it is, 7 months later, and it don't look that much different to me than when I was down here 4 months ago. It looks to me like they just decided, let's write off New Orleans, or at least let's write off the people of New Orleans and get our hands on the property. But I'm glad to see people here. This is a beautiful gathering. We've walked a long way. My feet are tired, but my spirits are high. Because we know that if we're going to change this country, it's got to be more than just your standard, normal, get out, get a permit, go have a demonstration, go see if you're on TV. We're going to keep doing the same old, same old. You got to start thinking out of the box, and that's what we did here. We're trying to launch a movement that will link the issues of war abroad with the issues of the war at home and try and raise it into a mighty force that can transform this country into something we can be proud of rather than a rip-off neocon scam.
Peter, people forward.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you. And before I leave the stage, I'm also quite honored, very pleased to introduce the next speaker. His name is Dave Cline, and Dave Cline and I go back quite a number of years. I don't even remember when we first met. Dave was served in the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. And ever since then, he has been an active leader in Veterans for Peace and Vietnam Veterans Against War. And today he remains an active leader, not only in the veterans community, but in generally in the anti-war movement, in this struggle to end the war in Iraq and to bring the troops home. So please join me in welcoming my very good friend, Dave Cline.
You know, what Leslie said is true, man, when she confused Vietnam with Iraq. You know what I mean? Because this is a deja vu thing.
Yeah, that's right.
How many people here was against the Vietnam War?
Yes.
How many people here are veterans of war? You know, see, we are dealing with trying to bring a truth to this country that this country does not want to accept. Or that a lot of people in this country are too blind to see. So in that sense, we are the prophets. We are the people trying to teach the truth and trying to organize a political force. So what we need to do is keep fighting here. You know, we're going to hear from Jimmy Massey. We know that there's Iraq veterans standing up. We know there's military families standing up. Just recently, a group called Gold Star Families for Peace was formed. And a Gold Star family means someone whose son was killed or daughter was killed. So we are seeing from the belly of the beast, if you will, a force rising up calling for peace. And so it's imperative on every one of us to not get confused and not get depressed. You know, the last election made a lot of people feel like, man, we give it our best shot, man. We were trying to knock this fool out of office, and he's back in there. So now what we have to do is keep our dukes up, pull our dukes back up, stop getting crazy from being American crazy, make America right, and we're going to keep doing that through a number of means. Now, I want to point out to you that March 19th represents the second anniversary of the war. It started in the illegal invasion of Iraq. And a number of us are organizing to go down to Fayetteville, North Carolina, to Fort Bragg for a demonstration. This is the second year that it's happened, where veterans and military families have led a demonstration outside the base to extend our hand to our brothers and sisters in the military and say, support our troops means bringing them home now. And that's what we stand for. So I hope you're all going to check it out. Check it out. I hope some people are going to join the buses. We're organizing them out of the United for Peace and Justice office. We are trying to get our activities together. We know that just demonstrating ain't enough, but demonstrating has to continue. So we're going to continue organizing because, I tell you what, like Leslie said, I've been fighting since I came home from the war to the war at home. I've been fighting my whole life. And I'm going to keep fighting until we win. And I believe we will win. So keep the faith.
Yes, we're here today to speak out against the unjust war, against the unjust killings, the thousands who are being killed, 2,500 young men and women. And meanwhile, the US is pouring $360 billion into this war, this unjust war. Senseless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We need to bring these men home. The War Resisters Support Campaign is a broadly based coalition of community, faith, labor, and other organizations and individuals who've come together to support US soldiers who are seeking asylum in Canada because they refuse to fight the illegal war in Iraq. Just as we have in the past, we want to provide asylum to those seeking asylum in our country. Today's rally is historic. It brings together US organizations of military families and veterans speaking out against the war, and in solidarity with the US war resistors in Canada. Our next speaker signifies this solidarity. He is David Cline, and he is the president of the Veterans for Peace, which has been instrumental in helping this new generation of war activists, anti-war activists within the military, and organizing to bring the troops home now. So please welcome Brother David Cline.
It's good to be here in Canada. You know, I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1967, but before I went into the Army, I used to come across to the Canadian side because if you remember back in those days, the steel mills were polluting Lake Erie so much that the beaches on the American side were pretty dirty. So we'd come up here to the Canadian side because the beaches were cleaner. And today, we have to come up here to the Canadian side because the political environment is a little cleaner than it is on the other side. It ain't that it's real clear. There's still a lot of pollution up here because the Canadian government still won't grant asylum to those who come up here, but at least the air is a little cleaner. So consider yourselves environmentalists trying to clean up this political environment up here today because it's pretty polluted on the other side of the river. You know, a lot of people like to say support the troops. And they slap a yellow ribbon on their car and they ride around with a flag decal on their car, and they don't have anyone fighting and they don't know anyone that's fighting, but they like to say they support the troops because it's an easy way to look like they're patriotic in the narrowest sense of the word. But we believe that real support for the troops does not mean cheering as they're sent to kill and die in a war that can't be justified by international law, justice, or morality. We believe that the only real support for the troops is to demand that they be brought home now and that they be treated justly when they come home. You know, we were doing like earlier the minister was speaking and he referred to draft dodgers and deserters. And those terms have always had a negative connotation to them. A draft dodger is someone who just doesn't want to do his share, so he's just running. He's a coward. A deserter is a guy who doesn't think about his comrades. He's just selfish, worried about his own little butt. So I don't like to use those terms anymore. We're not talking... When people leave the military today, they may be technically a deserter, but they have to be understood as what they really are, which are war resistors. We've seen young Iraq war veterans who have gone to Iraq and came back and refused to go. We've seen people file for conscientious objector. We've seen people like Camilo Mejia thrown in jail down there. We've seen people come to Canada. And we've seen soldiers that went to Iraq and came back and said what I did was wrong, and now I'm a member of the Iraq Veterans Against the War. So the important thing here is to support all forms of resistance. It doesn't matter if you resist before you went, while you're there, or when you came home. In the Bible it says it doesn't matter if you come to the table early or late. It says you got to come to the table. And this is a gathering of all the people at the table who are opposed to this war. And I'm here to say, on behalf of the Veterans for Peace, and on behalf of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, many of us who are wounded war veterans, that we are not against them, the war resistors. They always try to make it like those who went to war hate those who are too scared to go. What we're saying is those of us who went know those who don't want to go and won't go are taking as brave a stand as any guy that picks up a gun on the battlefield. And that we are veterans in support of the veterans who came here, in support of the veterans who refused to go, and in support of the brothers who come home and sisters who come home and speak out with the truth. So lastly, I just want to say, it's good to have an international gathering. You know, see, they always try to get us waving flags and yelling that our country's America right or wrong. America's the best, you know, let's twist Canada's arms, make them do what we want them to do.
This is an international gathering. And the only solution to our problems in the world today will when we begin to think internationally. Believe me, the government in the United States is thinking globally. George Bush is not interested in just Iraq. George Bush and his cronies are interested in ruling the whole world. The only solution will be for the people of the whole world to unite together.
This is the second time I've ever been in Cline's musical. First time was back in the early 60s where I came here and heard Bob Dylan perform for right now. Like Bruce said, I'm from Buffalo. I grew up on Maple Street over by Maston Armory. And then when we were in fourth grade, we moved to Eden, New York, where I grew up, graduated from high school, and where a good portion of my family still lives. My mother, father, two brothers and sister. And back in those days, the Vietnam War was starting. 1 week after I turned 20, I was drafted into the U.S. Army. Now, I didn't really know too much about what was going on, and also as a young man, felt like I really wasn't capable of making decisions. My father had been in World War II. My grandfather had been in World War I. And I thought that's just what we were supposed to do. When the country called, you went to serve. Wasn't that I hadn't heard people questioning the wisdom of our involvement. But I didn't feel as a young man I really had the ability to make those judgments. So I got sent to Vietnam, where I served as a rifleman and machine gunner with the 25th Infantry Division. In the time I was there, I was wounded 3 times, and eventually medevac out at the start of the 68 Tet Fest. When I came back shot up, and I also came back mad as hell, because I believe that what our government was telling us while we were there, and what they were telling the American public, was not the same thing as the real situation we faced over there. And I felt I had a responsibility to come back for my friends, for my brother, for the American people, and for the Vietnamese to come back and tell the truth. Yeah. And you know, a lot of veterans, Vietnam veterans, like to say to each other, "Welcome home, brother." And today I finally feel like I'm being welcome home here in Buffalo. You know, I wish I could tell you this was a happy homecoming. Unfortunately, because of what's going on in Iraq, it's a bittersweet homecoming. Because, you know, as a Vietnam veteran, I worked against that war, many of us did, and we hoped at the end that this country would learn something from that experience. You know, we hope that never again they put another generation of young men through the madness of Vietnam, or the madness of an imperial war with no justification. But unfortunately, what we found is a deja vu situation. While we went on and fell asleep after the war, those in power just figured out how to convince you to do it once more. So now we find ourselves in Iraq. Now, the majority of people in this country, over 70% according to some polls, are opposed to this war as a quagmire. I don't know if you remember back in the days of Richard Nixon, he used to always claim, the protesters are a minority, I have the silent majority with us. Well, today, we have the silent majority with us. The problem is,
silent majority says we're fed up, we're not going to be silent anymore. But we are the ones who have to motivate them. We are the ones who have to get them active. It doesn't do any good to sit in a comfort zone and say, I'm going to Home Depot to buy some new lawn chairs. Yeah, isn't the war bad? Let's have a barbecue and now we'll all go to Canada tomorrow. We need to take action. And let me say one other thing. You know, when we talk about the war today, it's important for us to also recognize and remember those who suffered from the wars of the past. Now, many American veterans of Vietnam suffered from exposure to Agent Orange, which was a chemical defoliant, a chemical weapon, a weapon of mass destruction. But white group has never been dealt with fairly at all, have been the Vietnamese victims of Agent Orange, which is the largest group. So today we have some materials in the back I hope you look at on the way out. Read this little orange pamphlet, which says Vietnam Agent Orange Relief and Responsibility Campaign, because we've allied ourselves with a group of Vietnamese victims of Agent Orange who have filed a lawsuit against the American chemical companies to try and get some kind of justice and compensation. And I hope we'll get support from all people, because there's something wrong with the nation and there's something wrong with the movement when all we worry about is the immediate war and forget the past victims of this transgressions against their nation. As a Vietnam veteran, I can't do that. I hope you all don't either. Now, my father, Dave Cline, is over there. I should tell you, he's a member of Veterans for Peace also. The rest of my family are a lot under here also. My sister Linda, my brother Steve, his wife Audrey, Heather, Jeremy, Jesse, and my brother Bruce is here. I feel like this is a real welcome home or a homecoming for me, both in terms of being with my family and being with the community of people that really care about what's going on. Well, when the war in Iraq started, many of us stood up against it even before it started, because we knew it was against the international law and against morality, and certainly had no justification in terms of any of the reasons given. So we, in the Veterans for Peace and the Vietnam Vets Against the War and other veterans organizations, joined with other Americans to oppose that war. And we knew from the beginning there was going to be a resistance movement developing within the military, because we knew that the men and women who serve in our armed forces do not go in there for low or immoral or unethical reasons. Many people go into the military for some of the highest reasons that you can believe in: defending your country, serving your people. And so we knew that there was going to be a resistance movement. I was involved in forming the Bring Them Home Now campaign. And that was our purpose, was to try and begin to promote to active duty servicemen and women what was going on and the facts about what was going on, and to encourage people to speak out. And there's been a number of resistors. Then we had Camilo Mejia and Stephen Funk and Pablo Paredes, and many others. There's been many others. Many people have gone AWOL. They don't even want to tell you the true number of people that are AWOL. Over the last summer, I went up to Canada 2 times, in Buffalo, at the Peace Has No Borders gathering, out in Vancouver at the Our Way Home reunion, which was Vietnam War resistors who had gone to Canada and current resistors. And even more importantly, we have soldiers coming back from Iraq who fought in that war, and Marines who have joined Iraq Veterans Against the War because they say, I saw what was going on, this is wrong. Now, I say this all the time. In the Bible, there's a parable in the book of Matthew where it talks about it's the parable of the wine vineyard workers. And what it says is that, I'm not going to tell you the parable because I'm not really up here to preach, but what it says is that whoever comes to the table, that's what counts. It don't matter if you come early or if you come late. It don't matter if you refuse to go to Iraq or if you go to Iraq. As long as you come back and stand up against the war. It doesn't matter if you come early or late. What matters is if you come to the table. So we have a broad movement of soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, and it's a growing movement of people who are standing up and saying, I won't go, or I went and it's wrong. And Lieutenant Watada is standing in the forefront of that struggle right now. Because he is not speaking as a pacifist. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with pacifists, that's not what I'm saying. But he is standing on military morality, military ethics, and international law, and is willing to stand up and say no. And there's nothing more courageous than that. There is nothing more courageous than standing up in the face. It's easy to go along with the flow. Believe me, it's very easy to go along with the flow, say, I don't know, that's what I did. It don't sound right, but who am I to say? This man has the courage to say, I know what to say, and it's up to each and every one of us to support him in any way we can. Now, I mentioned it doesn't matter if you come early or you come late, as long as you come to the table. And a number of people who served in the military or are serving in the military are sitting at the table right now. Touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. God help us all. Touch your name on the wall. Now usually walls are meant to divide us, to separate me from you. But God bless the wall that brings us together and reminds us of what we've been through. And God damn those liars and those tin-plated heroes who would play on the blood of these men. God give us the strength to stand up and tell them, never again. Touch your name on the wall. Touch your name on the wall. God help us all. Touch your name on the wall. That was the best line in the song, I think.